The sun was warm on my skin, and the smell of freshly cut grass filled the air. I was 17, and the world was a map of possibilities spread out before me. The biggest, most exciting landmark on that map was getting my driver's license. My dad, Robert, had promised me for years that he would teach me himself, but his schedule as a project manager had become a whirlwind of deadlines and business trips. The learner's permit in my wallet felt less like a ticket to freedom and more like a reminder of his absence. One evening over meatloaf, he broke the silence with a solution he thought was perfect. "I was talking to Mark today," he said, his voice cheerful. "He's offered to give you driving lessons in his old sedan. Says it's more forgiving than my SUV." Mark, my dad's best friend since their college days. He was a fixture in our lives, the fun uncle who never forgot a birthday, who told hilarious stories about my dad's questionable fashion sense in the 90s. I had a stack of birthday cards signed, "Uncle Mark," in my room. The idea was a relief. "Yeah, that sounds great, Dad. Thanks." The first lesson was exactly what I'd hoped for. Mark was patient, his instructions clear and calm. "Easy on the brake, Sarah," he'd say, or, "check your blind spot, always." We talked about school, about my plans for college, about music. It felt normal, safe. I came home buzzing, detailing every successful parallel park for my dad, who beamed with pride and gratitude toward his friend. But the atmosphere inside the car began to shift subtly during the third lesson. The easygoing chatter turned more personal. He started asking questions that felt a little too pointed. "Are you seeing anyone, Sarah? A pretty girl like you must have boys lined up." I laughed it off, a knot tightening in my stomach. Then came the comments. "That sweater really suits you," he'd say, or, "You have your mother's smile, you know." They were compliments, technically, but they landed with a strange weight, making the small space of the car feel even smaller. The real turning point was a Tuesday afternoon. We were practicing highway merging, and I was nervous. My hands were clenched on the wheel. "You're too tense," Mark said, and then his hand was on my shoulder, not in a brief, reassuring pat, but resting there. His thumb moved back and forth slowly. It wasn't a teacher's gesture. It was possessive, intimate. The air vanished from my lungs. Every instinct in my body screamed that this was wrong, but my voice was trapped. I spent the rest of the lesson rigid, answering in monosyllables, counting down the minutes until I could escape. The text started that night. "You did great today. Don't be so hard on yourself." I stared at the screen. It was after 9 p.m. Why was my dad's 50-year-old best friend texting me? I showed my dad the first one, framing it as, "Look, Mark is being nice." My dad just smiled. "See, he's really invested in helping you." The texts continued. "Saw a car like the one we practiced in and thought of you. Then, your dad is lucky to have such a sweet daughter." The subtext was a current running beneath the words, a current I was terrified to acknowledge. I started dodging lessons, making up excuses about homework or feeling sick. The guilt was immense. Was I overreacting? Was I being a dramatic teenager? He was my dad's best friend. To accuse him of something felt like accusing my own family. The breaking point came when my dad announced, "Mark's coming over for the game on Sunday. He said he misses seeing you around." The thought of him in our home, sitting on our couch, pretending everything was normal, made me feel physically ill. I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. The secret was a stone in my gut, and its weight was crushing me. The night before the game, I found my dad in the living room, reading a book. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "Can we talk?" He put his book down immediately, his fatherly radar pinging at the sound of my tone. "Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong?" Tears welled in my eyes before I could even form the words. It's about the driving lessons with Mark." I told him everything. I started with the comments, then the texts, and finally, the weight of his hand on my shoulder. I braced for disbelief, for him to tell me I was misreading things. But as I spoke, I watched the expression on my dad's face shift from concern to confusion, and then to a cold, hard anger I had never seen before. It wasn't directed at me. It was a quiet, terrifying fury. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out into the dark. His shoulders were set in a rigid line. "You should have told me sooner," he said, his voice low and tight. "But I understand why you didn't. Thank you for trusting me now." He turned to face me, and his eyes were filled with a pain that broke my heart. "None of this is your fault, Sarah. Do you understand me? Not one bit." He picked up his phone from the coffee table. I expected him to call Mark right then and there, to yell and scream. But he didn't. He walked over, knelt in front of me, and hugged me tighter than he had in years. "I am so sorry I put you in that situation," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I failed to protect you." The next morning, I heard him on the phone in his study. The door was closed, but I could hear the low, steady, and utterly furious tone of his voice. He wasn't shouting. It was worse. It was a final, unequivocal severing of a 30-year friendship. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The meaning was clear. Later, he told me simply, he won't be contacting you again. He won't be coming over. He is no longer a part of our lives. I saw Mark one last time, from my bedroom window. He came to our house, presumably to talk, to explain. My dad met him in the driveway. I saw my dad, my kind, gentle dad, standing tall, pointing toward the street. I saw Mark's shoulders slump, his head hang. He got in his car and drove away. I never saw or heard from him again. The fallout was quiet but profound. The story was sanitized for others. A falling out, a disagreement. But for my dad and me, it was a seismic event. We started spending more time together. He cut back on his work trips, and he, not a professional, became my driving instructor. Those hours in the car with him were quiet at first, then slowly filled with a new, deeper understanding. We had faced a darkness, and we had faced it together. He got me my first car, a used but reliable hatchback. The day I passed my driving test, we went for a long drive, just the two of us, with no destination in mind. The trust that had been fractured was not magically repaired, but it was being meticulously rebuilt, piece by piece, mile by mile. I learned that sometimes, the most shocking stories aren't about the bad thing that happens, but about the strength you find to stop it, and the people who stand with you in the aftermath. I learned that even a bond as strong as a 30-year friendship is not worth the price of your peace, and that my voice, however shaky, was powerful enough to change my world.